Welcome to KP Education Systems. I'm going to show you a very brief overview of the system to get you all the basics that you need to be able to get your students moving and teaching online in a very quick and simple fashion. So this is your dashboard, and here we see that we have two master courses set up and we have two classes set up in these master courses. This is where you see all your classes and can make some quick overview of what you're doing. So I see that I have one Culinary Arts Period 7, but I need another one. So I go over here, click on Add Course, and then I'll be able to add another class here if I have multiple periods. So let's go ahead. Period 3. Okay, so we do not use a new term, so we don't use that until basically the end of the year. Alright, so now that I've added a new class, I could then go and locate the course code. So you click on the class by opening it. So you click on the gray hat, in this case, anywhere. So I'm going to do it right here. And here's the course code. Now this course code is unique to this particular class, period 7. So each class will have their own course code that you will give the students either by email or through other methods. And that's how they sign in and get into this particular class. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to load additional content. So if I look at Culinary 1, I have these 4 modules in here. If I look at Culinary 2, I see we have these 4 modules as well. So you can see that Culinary 2 has different content. This lets you differentiate the content according to whatever your class calls for. So let's say I want to go ahead and add, let's say, making pasta. Then I click on Save. And what the system will do, it will load that module into that class, and now the students will be able to have access to it after it loads. And there we have it. So if I open up the class now, we'll see that we have 5 modules. Making pasta has been added. So now that I've added more content, I want to make some changes. So to make changes, you click on the blue hat next to the master course. The master course will let you edit the content for all your classes. And you'll notice that the banner turns red. So this means that you're able to edit in this particular class. So the very first thing I want to do is let's make knife skills be the last thing on the list. The order is very important because it affects how the student's home screen looks when it comes to next steps. So what next steps does is it takes the first item and it says, okay, you need to work on this, and the next thing you need to work on this. And within this, we have these different modules as well. So then, so it just goes on linearly through that model. So you can also make additional edits. So let's go back to making pasta and let's look at some pasta recipes. Well, actually, let's go back and let's do food preparation basics, cooking techniques, and preservation. So in the cooking techniques, we have a lot of techniques, and let's say you want to limit and change the amount of techniques you want available. Let's remove sous vide. Let's remove poaching and blanching. You could do that, and then you can click on Save, which will then save those changes. You could also rearrange these different modules as well. So if you want to move it around, you have the capability to do that. So those are some basic edits, and once you've edited it, the changes are going to be committed, but only when the student logs in. So if a student is currently in a class and you make these edits, they won't see these changes until next time they log in. So be sure to make sure to make the changes before they log in. So now that I'm done with that, I want to show you the next thing that you can do with this program. We already have a mastery system which creates formative assessments, but now I want to create a summative exam. So let's say I want to create a test in food preparation basics. So here's food preparation basics. I'm in this module and I want to create a test. So I click on Save Tests and it opens up my test bank. Now my test bank is currently empty, so I come over here and I click on the plus sign. This will give me 2 options, a dynamic test or a checkpoint test. Now, a dynamic test is really interesting because it uses magic and wizardry to create the most amazing tests in the world. Just kidding, actually. It actually uses artificial intelligence to create these tests. So these tests are designed based on the way the students have answered the questions during the mastery process, and it picks questions that are challenging for the students based on how they've answered previously. So let's go ahead and name this. So we'll call this one the food prep test, and this test it goes over the entire module. So you have a few um, choices. You could test the entire module, or we could test only the previous tested material, or you could also allow them to retry. Retry is very interesting because it makes the students remediate, so it could be actually a good thing for them to remediate, and you can change the number of questions they'll be presented here in this test. So the next test that we have here is a checkpoint test. This is a more traditional test where you pick the questions you want for this test. This will let you get access to our item bank. So let's go ahead and create a test. Let's call this one food prep test. Oh, I should probably call it something else. Food prep test. Let's do it 1 and 2. Okay, there we go. So I did 1 and 2 because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a test that crosses 2 different modules. So let's go ahead and open up that test. Once you open it, you see the different modules here that you can open up. Let's go ahead and open up kitchen equipment. So you'll see that we have questions that are tied directly to the content. So on the page commercial kitchen equipment, these are all the questions that are available for that. Here's for smallwares, bain-marie, so on and so forth. You see that we have a lot of questions in our item bank, typically 10 times more than the traditional curriculum that you find out in the marketplace. So you also notice that we have them tied to different types of Bloom's taxonomy. So if I want to select, if I like this question, I select Roboku, and I want to get them to answer this question about banquets, and let's pick another question, the Immersion Pro. Okay, so once I'm done selecting the questions I like, I scroll down to the bottom, and I click on Save. Now you have to do this before you select and open up another section. You have to save the questions section by section. So since I'm creating a cross-section test, typically you only do 1, but let's go ahead and open up flavors, herbs, and spices, and let's pick a few questions from this particular item bank. Let's go here with capers and scroll down to, let's do this understand question. We also have essay questions available, so if you want to add an essay, this will have them ask a question, but the system doesn't automatically grade essays. You'll have to grade those manually. All right, let's go down here and save. And then let's go ahead and scroll to the top. So here is the top, and we see we have a preview of the questions we selected. In this case, we selected 6 questions. Now at this point, I could turn the test on and the kids can take it online. But if you have some kids who don't have access to technology, or if they are adverse to taking tests on electronic devices, you could create a printer-friendly version. Now this printer-friendly version allows you to make some choices. You could choose the number of distractors. So if you have IEP or special needs students, you could change it down to 2. We typically leave this at 4. And then we click OK. And what it'll do is it'll generate a test based on the questions I selected. And down here we have the answer key. What we recommend that you do now is you take this and you copy this to a word processing program such as Word or Google Docs, and then you can make further edits from there. The other cool thing about our test generation process is that it actually randomizes the questions. So you see that the first question here is about nutmeg. So if I do it again, I'm just going to click on this. You'll see that the first question is not nutmeg. It actually became number 2. But the other thing that it does is it randomizes the distractors. So now Roboku is A. Next time I do another test process, it might actually be D. So this is really good, especially in the classroom if you don't want your students to cheat off your neighbors. You could create an A, B, C, D version of this and really mix it up. Okay, so now that I'm fine with this selection, I click on Done. And then when I click on Done, I get taken back to the test bank, and you'll notice that these are not blue. That means the tests are currently off, and if I click on these 2, it will turn them on. Please note that when you turn it on, the tests will become available, but only after a student logs in. So if they're logged in and you turn it on, they won't see it appear on their screen until after they logged in. So do that prior to that. And the same thing goes for the other way. If you turn it off while the student is logged in, they'll still have access to it until they log out of their session. Okay, so that is the test bank. Now the next thing that you'll run into immediately is our projects and activities. So I'm going to go to a project here. The first one that you'll encounter is probably an introduction to culinary arts if you have that particular module, and they'll probably be in culinary history. So in culinary history, we have 4 projects or activities. They're denoted by this icon, a clock. So the first one is a celebrity chef biography. So in an activity, the students will do multiple things. They'll first have a problem statement. They'll have a badge they'll earn. They'll have content that they will then review for this particular project, and then they'll have steps to solve this problem. Down here we have evidence. Now evidence is probably the most important part of what you need to do to edit, because let's say you don't want to use the essay rubric, or you don't want them to upload a file, you can actually modify that. So scrolling up to the top, we have the edit button. You click on that, and here we go. So the edit button lets you edit every single part of this project. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the title. If you want to change the title to something more appropriate for your class, you can. You could also change the badge. So if you have a better badge or a different badge that's personalized to you or your school, you can totally upload that badge. Then you can also change the problem statement. So if this problem statement is not to your liking, you can edit it and change it. You could change the information, but typically you leave this alone because we've already created the content that the students need to complete this. Then we have the materials. Now this is very important because let's say they don't have access to a word processing software, or if you're working on an activity where it requires them to purchase ingredients that they don't have, you could put some exceptions or modify that as well. Adding resources lets you add PowerPoints, PDF documents, Word documents, or anything that you need to upload to the student to have them download. So this lets you add resources. Steps is where you can then edit the steps. So in this case, we have one step here where you can then change the directions to apply to your situation. We typically leave section 8, adding objectives, terminology, and careers alone, but 9 is probably the most important one. So here we have multiple evidence points. Now each evidence point allows the student to complete and start to reveal the badge. The badge actually starts out completely covered by a red circle, but as they complete each of these, it'll start to reveal. So in this case, we have them needing to test at an apprentice level on that particular piece of content. We ask them a question or a prompt. This reflection question, they need to answer it. You could also change the question to your liking. We have them upload a file, but let's say you want them to upload a file using your Google Classroom or Drive or Moodle or whatever program you have. You can remove it, so that's not part of their requirement. Here is the rubric for a essay, and here's a rubric for a presentation. So let's say you don't want them to do a live presentation in front of you or their peers via any kind of like web conferencing. You can also remove that, and that will remove that requirement here. You can also ignore it later too, so you don't have to remove this rubric. So once you made these changes, that will be reflected in the student's count. So let's go ahead and take a look at another one here. Let's go to the next Food Network producer. This one has slightly different requirements. But what I want to show you here is this one has 2 steps. So with step 2, we have this information. We have a callout box, which has a fact type, but we also have teacher only. This is only available to the teacher to see, so the students won't be able to see this information when it's tagged teacher only. Okay, so what happens when a student submits evidence? Let me show you what that would look like. So let's go back home, and we're going to click on Dashboard. So in Dashboard, we are able to do multiple things besides grading evidence. So let's go ahead and take a look. So first thing we want to do is when you click on the student's name, you could verify that their email address is typed in correctly. One of the biggest problems that students have is mistyping their email address. They might type in .com instead of .edu or vice versa, or in a lot of cases, they have their student email address, which is usually students, plural, and they type in student. So if they do that, you can verify that, and at that point, you would then remove the student from the class and have them start over. You cannot change the email address from this once it's already registered, so you just better to have them start over from scratch. You could also rename this student's name, so if you want to change it, you can, because some students goof off and put in some wacky names, and you could change that, or you could just enforce a rule. Reset password is actually very good, so if a student forgot their password, you could send them this instructions, or better yet, you could just change it for them yourself. So you just follow these directions, log in as a student, and then click on forgot password, and then you have the code that they need to change it. This is especially useful if a student can't receive emails from an outside source, and then change it for them. One of the things that we recommend is to change your password to 123. That is very difficult to mess up, as it's just numbers, no letters, no capitalizations, and really good if they're having problems remembering their password over and over again. All right, let's get to evidence. So in this case, we have crash test dummy submitted evidence over here. Oops, I switched over to the wrong screen. My bad. All right, so back to crash test dummy. We have refreshed the screen, and it looks like we have two items that require our attention. So we have to look at that. So I open up evidence, and then we see we have the next Food Network producer activity that has been done by the student, and let's go ahead and expand that. So here we have a reflection question and the answer given by the student, and we also have a rubric. So first thing I want to do is see how they answered. If I like it, I can accept it. If I don't like it, I can reject it. So when I reject it, it'll turn red, and the student will then have to answer this question a second time. If I click on collect, this will actually let me annotate this box, so I could say something like, you will need to elaborate on this more. So then when I submit that, and then I get back to reject, then when they log in, they'll see that I've annotated their question with my notes. So then they could submit it again. Now, if I want to ignore this rubric, I could ignore it entirely. Or let's say I watched their presentation, then I can just grade them. So let's go ahead and I say, okay, this student did a good job on content, was not prepared at all, had okay visual aids, and did not collaborate with her peers at all. Or let's just say they did it a little bit. So now you see that we've scored 9 points on this grading rubric, scoring a 56%. I'll accept that now, and we'll see that it turns green. So on the student screen, you'll see, like you saw earlier, that the pie has moved, and now we're at about 3/4 done for this particular project. And then once they complete it, they'll earn the badge, and it'll show up as their award. Okay, so that's a project. We have multiple projects, so if you don't like a project, you can go ahead and delete it at that point. So these are the key things that you'll be encountering using our program. This is a quick overview. We have a lot more content and information that will take you through multiple levels of this program. You can actually add your own content, such as videos, recipes. You can even create your own projects in here. You can add questions, which will then be tied into our assessment system. Then the artificial intelligence will start to kick in. So there's a lot of things that you could do to further augment and customize this to your liking. So this is just scratching the surface, but I hope to see some amazing things that you can create. We've seen some great projects and activities that were created by teachers. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys create in the coming months as we get through this. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. You know how to reach us. Thank you very much, and have